Hey everyone, the Dark Knaik is here. A Complete Unknown is a biographical musical drama based on American folk music legend Bob Dylan, played by Timothée Chalamet. The film is adapted from Dylan Goes Electric, written by guitarist and music historian Elijah Wald. The film covers Dylan's premature musical career, which began when he was mere 20 in 1961, until the controversial 1965 Newport Folk Festival event, when Dylan performed with electric instruments, which was not so folk music then. The film also covers a few important angles of Dylan's 1960s life, like his professional relation with Pete Seeger, a legendary figure in the folk music movement, as well as his love affairs with another folk music legend, John Baez, and another artist, Susie Rotolo. But I was confused watching Dylan romancing both Baez and Rotolo in the same time period. If I'm not wrong, Rotolo was Dylan's first serious affair, and with Baez, the relation developed after breaking up with Rotolo. Also, the film didn't bring out that Rotolo got pregnant with Dylan's child, and they mutually agreed on abortion. Maybe Dylan requested not to include, although I'm unsure if Dylan was involved in this film. Dylan meets his idol, Woody Guthrie, when he travels to New York. I have read about its accuracy, but unsure if Pete Seeger was there. But there is a sequence at the start when Seeger is on trial, convicted of contempt of Congress for refusing to answer questions about his politics, which is true. Seeger joined and left a communist party in the 1940s and was therefore blacklisted. His time in the 1950s was troubled by the House Un-American Activities Committee (HUAC) that interrogated about his political and personal connections and associations. James Mangold has directed this film, and while I was watching this film, I was remembering that he also directed Walk the Line back in 2005, which was a biopic based on Johnny Cash. If you have watched both the films, you will observe that both have similar visual aesthetics. One reason is that the artistic creativity is visually presented by the same director. And another reason is that both Dylan and Cash belong to almost the same musical timeline. Cash was obviously senior and became popular in the mid-50s. Joaquin Phoenix played Cash in Walk the Line, and with no heavy surprise, Johnny Cash showed up here. But this time, it was played by Boyd Holbrook. What if Phoenix had reprised his memorable Oscar-nominated role? Cinematically striking and magical. But in real, playing a 30-year-old Cash will be pretty young for a 50-year-old Phoenix who portrayed 20 years ago when he was 30. And using CGI de-aging on Joaquin Phoenix would have killed the dedicated Dylan storytelling. And Holbrook played a fair Johnny Cash. A delightful experience of watching this film was observing mimicry of actors who played those folk music legends, either speaking or singing. Personality-wise, Edward Norton impressed me as Pete Seeger. Although Norton and Seeger did not sound similar, but he acted him very well. The mannerism and the way he plays banjo. Monica Barbaro played John Baez, and this was personal because I'm a huge fan of John Baez and I have listened to every single John Baez song. And I was astonished listening to Monica singing John Baez songs exactly in the same tone. What shocked me was the fact that Monica had neither sung nor played guitar before this film. When she was singing and mimicking John Baez so wonderfully, I thought the actress was also a singer. But no, Norton and Barbaro were rightfully nominated for the Best Supporting Actor and Actress at the Oscar, respectively. As far as Chalamet is concerned, it may not come as a surprise that his face doesn't remind of a 20-year-old Bob Dylan at all. Maybe a young Miles Teller closely resembles Dylan's younghood. It is Chalamet's work on hair that convinces to be a promising Dylan. But Chalamet's portrayal indeed was charismatic, the voice tone, the gesture, and most importantly, the way he sings and how he sings. And that is the biggest plus point. And that plus point comes from the last 5 years of extensive work of Timothée Chalamet to become that young Dylan. And to become like him, he worked with a vocal coach, a guitar teacher, a dialect coach, a movement coach, even a harmonica guy, taped paper sheets on his wall of Dylan's song lyrics that he wrote and sang on his acoustic guitar in Dylan's voice. His hard work paid off and now will be remembered as one of his most memorable roles. The United States of the 1960s will always be remembered for the political tensions, counterculture, as well as changing face in the musical transitions in the rock and roll, surf rock, and folk. The folk musical environment was beautifully picturesque. How wonderful the musical scenery looks to appear when greats like Dylan, Cash, Baez, and Seeger share the same stage. Dylan going electric brought mixed responses from the crowd, and the direction brought tremendous realism and balance of both kinds of crowd. While watching the film, I had a feeling that the film missed out on portraying another folk music songwriter, Phil Ochs, who had a friendly professional rivalry with Bob Dylan. In fact, a way bigger miss was not showing the angle of Sarah Lowndes, Dylan's first wife. This film covers Dylan's life between 1960 and 65, whereas Sarah Lowndes and Bob Dylan met in 1964. But Mangold tried to bring as many details in the film if he could, like emphasizing on the whistle that Dylan buys on one of the street stalls. It becomes an inspiration to be played in his song Highway 61. Speaking of inspiration, the film depicts that Dylan met Bobby Newell and listened to his art that galvanized him to change his musical method from folk to folk rock. I have no knowledge if this is true, plus it is inaccurate because the film shows that they crossed paths in 1965, whereas in real, they met for the first time in 1961, and that too at some folk festival. I opine the title of the film must have been Blowing in the Wind, rather than A Complete Unknown. Anyway, one of the most impressive factors that carried this story throughout its length was that despite being singular in narrative, the story brought other characters in prominence. Squid McNairy's Woody Guthrie had nothing much to add, but his repeated presence was truly important. Holbrook's Johnny Cash in a brief presence was the prime motivator of his artistic innovation. The essence and breathing of the folklore was bestowed on Dylan's legacy that was scented in a compelling storytelling. A Complete Unknown is truly one of the best films of 2024. I'm Sunny Knaik. Thank you for watching my video, really appreciate it. If you like my content and really want to watch this kind of shit more, then subscribe to my channel and don't forget to click on the bell icon and drop your messages and suggestions in the comment box down there. Take care and always look on the bright side of life.